morning, guys. How's everybody doing? Okay, so I said I was going to talk about ego death today, and that's what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about ego death. So if you Googled it, you will know that ego death is something that actually I don't even know what the Google definition of ego death is. I know I looked it up a long time ago when I first heard the term, and it's funny because I heard the term and I thought that's exactly what happened to me, and then I Googled the term and I saw that's exactly what happened to me. So I'm sorry, unfortunately I didn't Google it. I didn't look up the definition. It's not a real you don't go up to a doctor and say, I experienced ego death. No, it's not like a real term, but it's just a way to describe something that many people have experienced. Like, for example, if you are familiar with ayahuasca, it's like a plant in South America that people deliberately take in order to hallucinate, and they experience something very, very strong. They experience an out-of-body experience, kind of, but it's very much. It also is very physical. The experience only happens because your body is going under a very strong side effect of the plant. And there's a lot of fucking vomiting involved, so that's kind of hardcore. I have not done that. I mean, maybe I'll do that in my midlife crisis, maybe, but I think ego death is a good way to start off on a spiritual awakening, kind of, or just self-improvement. So the way I experienced ego death was when I dropped acid. Maybe it was a long time ago. I was probably 19 at the time. So it was years ago. And once again, like I said yesterday, I'm not promoting or encouraging people to take, drugs, because I personally know many people who succumb to the deterioration of themselves due to drugs. And it's due to addiction, and it's due to the fact that if they take one thing, suddenly they want to know what the next thing feels like. And I get it. Curiosity really does kill the cat. But if you feel like exploring and you do feel responsible enough to take care of your body and know your limits, then by all means do it. And that was another thing, is I guess I don't have a very addictive personality. I can take things and not, for example, I have a pack of cigarettes in my backpack right now from a week and a half ago, and it's still maybe 70% full. And I know people who have told me, people who smoke a pack a day have told me dude, they go bad after a while. I'm like, dude, I really don't, maybe, yeah, they do, I guess, right? But I smoke one every maybe 5 days. I just do, because sometimes I'm stuck in traffic and I really need it, but I'm not addicted to it. I'm not addicted to alcohol. I can say, though, I was psychologically addicted to marijuana at one point, and that is terrible. So I can see, coming from a Hispanic family, Mexican culture absolutely hates marijuana. If you have Mexican parents, they hate marijuana. It's just it's a slippery slope for many people. And I can see why. I was definitely at rock bottom when I used to smoke marijuana, fucking 4 blunts a day. It was bad. And I could see it in my face. I didn't look healthy. But not to say I stopped altogether. My fiance does it still, and I do it sometimes with him too. But that's pretty much it. So anyway, when I was maybe about 19 years old, I was very unhappy. I was in a place where I was still doing community college. crossing road. And then, I don't know, basically everything a 19-year-old goes through, I was going through that. So, of course, I had bad friends with bad influences. This particular friend had access to acid, so I'm like, let's do it. So I did it, and it was actually very beautiful. It was a very beautiful experience. Excuse me, I just had my coffee. I actually brought my coffee with me because I couldn't drink it at home. So I got like the coffee groups. But yeah, anyway, so I dropped the acid one night, and the way that it feels, it's like at first you don't feel anything. Like at first you're just kind of like waiting for it to happen, and it's kind of tedious. You're just like, do I feel it yet? It won't be until maybe about 40 minutes to an hour until you finally start feeling like a little tingle, like kind of like the shivers, like when you feel a breeze coming on. That's kind of what it feels like. Like you're starting to get the chills. And then suddenly, like, it's kind of like your hands get like clammy and like your palms are sweaty. And then, so those are the initial physical responses. So once your hands are clammy and suddenly you're going like this to your hands, like, that's when you know it's starting to affect you. And after that, it's all you. So that's when it starts seeping into your brain, kind of, I guess. And I just remember that particular night, so I lived in a city at the time, somewhere in Orange County, and I just remember all of the lights were looking like, you know that movie Batman Forever, I think it's the one that directed by Tim Burton. You know how it looks kind of like green and red and like it just has like those tones like green and red, like kind of like lights. That's how the sky looked. Like the sky looked very like a graph was in the sky, but with red and green lights. Like everything looked all connected, everything looked alive, like the lights looked alive, everything was just illuminating my space, which is obviously what lights do. But I don't know, suddenly you start viewing everything very metaphorically. You're just like, okay, these lights are here like with a purpose to illuminate my world, and I don't know, you just start analyzing everything metaphorically. So point is, it was really a great experience. Like I had fun. I got to talk about a lot of feelings. It was very like emotional. But that wasn't the ego death. That was just me on acid. You know, that was just me experiencing acid. I would listen to music, and it was like the most beautiful thing. Like definitely 10 out of 10 recommend taking any psychedelic and listening to music. But meaningful music, not like Ariana Grande or something like that. But like, you know, meaningful shit. So, like very long instrumental type of music. At the time, Flume, if you're familiar with Flume, that guy was like up and coming. So that was what I listened to that day, along with other music. But you know, that one specifically stood out. So, like I said, that wasn't the ego death. That was just my trip. So, in the town or city that I grew up in, it was time for me to go home, right? So I live past the Civic Center, and then my friend that I was hanging out with lives right before that. So, in order for me to get home, I had to cross like a Civic Center, like where the public library is, and you know, all that stuff. So even before I had left his house, I was like, this is weird. Like, I want to stay here because I want to continue staying with this person who I really connect with, but I don't want to go to my individual box. That's literally how I was thinking of my home. Like, and what's notable about that time is my mom was in Mexico, and my dad obviously had to get up for work in the morning. So I think that's why I did it too, because I'm like, okay, he's gonna be at home, and he will be too busy with work to kind of like pay attention to me. And my mom wasn't around to begin with. She was on her vacation in Mexico. So I think that's why I did it, like just so I wouldn't have eyes on me. And point is, so I was thinking like, okay, I have to leave like this soul who I wish I could just keep with me. Like it's like I wanted to keep his soul with me, you know, like I didn't want to separate from that person's soul, because like you feel so connected with people, like especially people that bring out the best in you. Like we hung out with another friend of ours a little bit earlier that day while we were both on it, and she brought out such a beautiful like part of us that we didn't want to part with her either. But anyway, it made me very depressed to think about the fact that at the end of the day, everyone goes back to their own box. And that box was my home, you know? So I was pretty bummed. And then it was time to go home. I was walking in that direction, and there's a huge homeless problem in my hometown. So as I was walking to that civic center, through the library, through all those buildings, there were just people sleeping or camping or living on the street there in their little tents, you know, in their huge blankets, because that was the only thing they had covering them from the cold. And I mean, there were still people awake. It was late, but there were still people awake, you know, talking softly so that the others could sleep. So of course, as I made my way through that, I was very quiet as well, because I'm like, okay, people are sleeping here. Like, this isn't anybody's home, but this is their home. Like, they don't have a box to go back to. And of course, that ties into another, like the homeless people problem. I can talk about that another day too. How many of them chose to live that life? Like, how many of them deliberately said, fuck your box. I don't want to live in a box. Like, I would rather live out. I mean, there's no telling. There were so many of them. Like, I could say hundreds of them. That, you know, for me to say, oh, poor them, that's how they ended up. Like, yeah, that probably applies to maybe like 80% of them. But how many of them deliberately were like, fuck the system. Fuck the box. I don't go back to a box. The world is my box. And that's why. So, okay, so it was a very conflicting feeling, because a huge part of me felt a huge pity. Like, a huge part of me was like, oh my God, they don't have a box to go home to. No. But then another part of me was curious, because I was like, they had it. They didn't want the box. They are living outside the box. Literally. So, anyway, my friend could see that had affected me, because I guess I became really quiet. And yeah, and then we said our goodbyes, and I went back upstairs to my apartment where my parents, where my family lived. Everyone was asleep. I lived with my, you know, I said my mom was in Mexico, but my dad and my brothers were asleep. So I laid in bed, and I just couldn't stop thinking about those people, because they were the people that live outside the box, and I wanted to feel great pity for them, and I almost wanted to like shelter them, even though of course I had no means to. It's not like I could be like, come on everybody, come up to my dad's house. Like, no, that's way out of my jurisdiction, I guess. I don't know, but it made me realize, like, as much as some of those people chose that life, like the living outside the box life, I felt the coldness. I felt the dirtiness of it. And even though a few moments prior to that, I was like, okay, I have to go back to my box, like all solemnly and just not looking forward to it. Like, suddenly it made me realize, like, at least I have a box to go back to. At least I have some sort of shelter, some sort of warmth, and people waiting for me. Because at the end of the day, that's the only reason I went home, is because my dad was like, where are you? Well, he texted me and he was like, where are you? Can you come home already? feeling right there, that feeling of realizing, like, hey, like, what bothers you or what annoys you is what some people don't even have anymore. Like, the fact that you have to go back to a box and there's people waiting for you and expecting you, and there's a nice comfortable bed waiting there for you instead of a floor or some grass. That was my ego death right there. And I remember lying awake thinking, like, that I was the luckiest person on the planet. I was the luckiest person on the planet. Like, I had everything. I had my family, I had warmth, I had food, I had a blanket, I had a good time, I had friends. It made me think, like, anything before that, anything I might have been, like, you know, kind of a, I guess, anything I had a grudge against for the way I lived. Because I didn't grow up in a big house. I grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment, you know? And it just made me so grateful for that. And of course, obviously, this is where I think a lot of, like, for example, if you grew up in a Christian home, you don't need fucking ego death. Like, shit, you have ego death probably every Sunday, but or every day, really. But for somebody like me, who was, I guess, I didn't grow up in a religious home. I didn't. Yeah, there was just a lot of reasons why I ended up taking that acid. Like, that alone says something about me, right? So the fact that that's what I experienced, I think that was like, they say that, okay, when you're tripping on psychedelics, they say that it's basically like the energy of the world, like, seeping through you, and that's what you feel, right? So you feel like the vibrations of the world, and I think that's what the world wanted me to understand. Like, hey, like, yeah, you may think, like, you know, shit annoys you or whatever, but you actually have it way better than 1,000 people, or, you know, X amount of people. And yeah, I remember after that, you know, it was a little weird, like, the few days after that, because I was really happy. I was like, oh god, I'm so blessed. Yes, this is great. Like, I live such a great life. And I remember I was working at an arcade at the time. Oh, those were the funnest days of my life. But yeah, I remember I tried explaining it to people, and, like, it didn't make sense to people. Like, it probably doesn't even make sense right now to some people, and I'm sorry. But unless you've taken it, like, then you'll know what I'm talking about. But I remember that after that, I just remember being a lot better of a person. Like, that's when my psychological addiction to marijuana ended, because I realized I didn't need that at all. In fact, I was missing out on a lot because of marijuana addiction. Like, and one thing that definitely improved after my ego death is, so I have a older brother who is, he's been, like, clinically depressed pretty much our entire, like, adult life. Well, he got diagnosed with depression at a very, like, maybe, like, he was like 11 or 12 or 13. He was a little kiddo, and that's another thing I could talk about another day, is just depression. But and I remember I resented him for that. Like, I resented him. Like, I was like, wow, you get to say that you have depression. Like, oh my god, like, boo hoo hoo. But after that, after my ego death, I was like, some people don't even have a brother, and honestly, he went through his own, like, troubles and, like, his own, like, battles, and most of the time I was nothing but a brat to him. Like, I was like, oh, get out of my face type shit. So I remember one day, like, shortly after my ego death, we had started to get along again, slowly but surely. Like, we would bicker, but, like, we ultimately, compared to how we used to be, we got along again. And then one day, I guess we were gonna go out to eat, and suddenly I just broke down, and I just started wailing, and I was like, I'm so sorry that I was so heartless and so non-understanding, like, with you about your depression and about what you went through. And, like, the old me would never have done that. The old me would never have like apologize for something, because you know, when you do something wrongly, you apologize for it right away. Like, that's good. But like, what I was apologizing for, okay, that should be a word though. What I was apologizing for was just my entire like behavior towards him for years, and he was like, "Aw, I already forgave you for that a long time ago," and it was a pretty beautiful moment. But anyway, so after my ego death, I was still afraid like of life, kind of, but I basically grew the lady balls, to move out of my house. That's when I moved up north. Basically, ego death like led me onto a better path, like a better road in life, because it made me realize like I'm such a lucky person and I can't throw that away. Like, I have a box. And of course the theme or the topic of a box, and you know, all that, like, that could be its own, you know, video itself. Like, do you believe in the box? Like, are the four walls, like, is that something to you? Do you think society needs that? Do we not need that? Is that just a social construct to make us dependent? But yeah. Also depression, that's another thing that I can talk about. I don't have depression, and I've never like been diagnosed with depression, but my mom and my older brother have for a very long time. So that's something very close to home, you know? Okay, I'm almost to the office. But I mean, obviously I feel like there's maybe a lot of things that I forgot about ego death. Like, that's one of those things that when it happens, like, you're ready to talk about it all day. Like, now it's been years since I had ego death, so it's kind of like, it's like talking about like your favorite birthday party, like a few years down the road. You're like, well, I remember there was a piñata and I remember I had fun, but suddenly, you know, you don't remember all the details. So I mean, I would love to one day just maybe take it again and then like talk to you guys while I'm on it. Of course, that's something personally I don't think you would do when you're on a psychedelic, because the simple idea of talking to an object is like, that won't, like, your psychedelic mind will not let you do that. It'll be like, really? Like, no. Like, don't talk to anything right now. Like, just enjoy the moment. And yeah, that's really what it is about. Just enjoy the moment and all that stuff. But yeah, sorry if it was confusing. Sorry if it was vague. I can try to go into more detail about it some other time. Or if you have any questions about it, I guess, like, let me know. Alright guys, have a wonderful day. Bye.